Mr. Montlekibelo go di setla o seng ha ka jeno na ntse lona la thamiso me makgatlele o re kenang hona ke makgatlele wa boraro. Isale dinaha tsa Afrika di batla di kekitlela haholo kgolong ya moruo le kgolong ya dipolotiki hore boneng dinaha tsa Europe, America le China di bonala di ba le seabo se seholo haholo ntlafatsong ya dinaha tsa Afrika ka dithuso tsa ditjhelete le merero e itseng. Morao tjena bona la jwale merero ena yo dinaha tsena di thusang dinaha tsena tsa Afrika ka yona di ba le kgahlamelo e kgolo diqetong tseo mohlomong di nkuwang ke baetapele ba dinaha ho pelaelo e leng hore dinaha tse kang China di batla di na le seabo se itseng hore diqetelong ya tsatsi di tle di une molemo o itseng ka rona ya ka dinaha tsa Afrika empa dinaha tsena di biletswe mohlomong di le fe mekoloto yo di kena ka hare yona. O senga ka tseno re buisana jalo le Professor Dr. Peter Baofu. Professor Baofu o tsamaile dinaheng tse ngata haholo Afrika a lekola hore na ditaba tsa di sebetsa jwang dinaha tse ka fetang 20 ho bona hore na tshebetso ya dinaha tsa Afrika e tsamaya jwang le ho ithuta jwalo ka le sengodi sa dibuka tse ngata mme re tlo tlisa tsela eo yena o tlisang kgolo ya dinaha tsa Afrika ka yona. Professor Peter Baofu, welcome to Tamiso this morning.
Thank you.
And welcome again.
Thank you.
You traveled almost 20 African countries and other countries as well. And last time you were here, we discussed how China-US trade war could impact Africa. Now, my question is, as an academia, is there a chance that Africa will in time reach a level of maturity in terms of development?
It depends what you mean by development. It also depends on what you mean by level of maturity. Because I do not think that development is something that you have to copy from one standard and then you use that standard to judge. So when you say what is the level of maturity, then that means that you need to have a standard. Is that the Western standard that you have in mind? But I think that that's not a fair comparison. Just like if I ask you, you are a woman, and then I use the standard of a man to judge you, is that fair? Or conversely, if you are a man, I use the standard of a woman to judge you, is that fair? So what I'm trying to say, I have written a book on development, and that's called After Development, the future of post-human after development, in which I proposed that the notion of development is so Western-centric, is so one-dimensional that we need to get away from it, to have a new understanding of development. In this case, for example, I think that in a way, implicitly, that's also Western-centric. I think that you should ask yourself the question that I talk about in some of my publications and also in some other interviews, is that you need to know who you are as a country, as a people. And then from that standard now, you can judge yourself, how much do you measure up with what you want to achieve. But instead of using other standards from where? From America, from Finland, from France, from Italy, from Japan, but you are not Japanese. You are not American. You are not German. But why do you use the standard? So it's time for you to say, what is that thing, that identity which defines you as a people in Lesotho in this case, or as African in this case, and say, that is my identity. Then from that identity, you use that as a standard. Now you judge yourself. Do I measure up with what I think that I am? That is, and then you develop that based on that one. But instead of copying from others, let's not go very far.
Does culture play a part in developing a certain country?
Culture does play a part, but as I said in my publications, there are 4 major causes that you need to pay attention. One is culture. Second is society. Third is nature. And the fourth is the mind.
How do those contribute?
They make contribution in different ways. For example, the culture in an Islamic society is different from a culture in a Buddhist society. It does affect the way that you behave. It does affect the way that you approach learning. It does affect the way that you innovate, for example. It does affect the way that you work. Do you eat, for example, during Ramadan? No, right? Does it affect your productivity at that time? It does. So it does affect you in many ways, not just so it's about culture, society, the political system, the economic system. It does affect you in a certain way. Nature, the environment, the geographical environment in Africa, that is very important. People have often forgotten about the environment. It does affect you in the way that what you want to do and how you do it. About the human mind, the mindset, different races, different genders, different groups, different ethnicities. They have different genetic makeup. it does affect how you behave.
Are the economic system not universal?
No. I have been in so many countries now, more than 100. I can see that so clearly in my mind, even though it's not clear to many other people. No, not at all. Economic system I have seen now, they are so diverse. Now, sure, you can classify them under certain categories, but no, it's not universal. But it doesn't mean that you cannot learn from each other. Africans can learn from the Chinese, or Chinese can learn from the Europeans, or they can learn from the Africans too. But I think that that kind of symmetry, no, it's not universal. But you can still learn. And that's why, again, what is your identity? Universality, by the way, is a modern ideology, is a modern paradigm. And I propose in my publications, I propose after postmodernity, after postmodernism, in order to go beyond the paradigm. That's why I propose after development as an alternative too. But after development is also not the end of the story.
Okay. Now, most African countries are being aided by China and America, and America is lately renouncing bit by bit. How will this impact the continent?
It does impact in different ways. As I said in my book, not just one, several of them, the Chinese way of development now is very different from the European ways of development in the past. You have the colonial history and all that. The new way of development that China is proposing is also related to what I call post-democracy and post-capitalism. Post-democracy is the notion that democracy will not last. It will be replaced by different political systems. Post-capitalism is also the idea that capitalism will not last. It will be replaced by different economic systems, and there are different versions. And the Chinese version is contributing to that direction. India, by the way, is the next. But I propose more than many different versions. But there's, again, no single version which is universal, again. The same pattern.
What seems to be the stumbling block in Africa's growth?
There are many, I say a lot of good things, but also say a lot of bad things. Again, they can be classified in terms of the 4 categories that I just mentioned. Cultural problems, social problem, natural problem, and mental problems. So there are 4 categories of reason, but there's no one single reason that you can point out and say, that is the problem. If we fix that problem, then the entire problem will disappear. It doesn't work like that. A good example is corruption. In the Western world, because of the ideology, they focus too much on the question of corruption in Africa. But I think that many issues in Africa is not about corruption. Corruption is only one thing, but there are many other things in terms of the 4 categories that I just mentioned. By the way, this is the negative side. On the positive side, you also have a lot of opportunities. There are a lot of good things about Africa, which is very important. In a way, Africa is not poor. Africa is very rich. And also in terms of the 4 categories that I just mentioned, the cultural richness, the social richness, the natural richness, and the mental richness. And that's why in my book on post-capitalism, I said there's no wealth without poverty, and there's no poverty without wealth. That means that if you have wealth in America, they also have a lot of poverty in some other ways. But if you have poverty in Africa, they also have a lot of wealth in some other ways too. But that is the diversity of the system itself.
You said Africa is rich, but most of their mineral resources are not extracted by them. Why?
Oh, well, you can go back to a lot the history, because Africa has long been an agricultural society, an agricultural continent. See, if you look at the West have gone through different stages. They were agricultural at one point, and then become industrial, and then post-industrial, for example, and you move on. Africa, in many ways, is still very much agricultural. It's not yet reached the stage of industrial or post-industrial eras, and because of that reason, you do not go far beyond that. Now, you might ask a deeper question, how come that is the case? Then we have to go back to the 4 major categories that I just mentioned: cultural reasons, social reasons, natural reasons, and mental reasons. But I don't think that's necessarily bad. Some other countries, for example, sometimes they specialize in agriculture. Look at Australia, for example. Some of the countries in Scandinavia, many of them, they export a lot of agricultural products. But many of them are not a manufacturing powerhouse. but they are still living okay. You see that? So you don't need to, in some other countries like UAE, they export oil, for example, mostly, but they are doing very well. So you don't need to be like a manufacturing powerhouse like China in order to be successful. That's why you ask this question, is economic system universal? I'm telling you, it's not. It depends on who you are. So let's say back to the question again, what are you? Who are you? What is your identity? Based on the 4 categories of reasons that I just mentioned to define what you want. What do you do? How do you survive? What do you export? What do you import? You see that? Back to the same question again.
Then I'll go back to my question. Why? Then you said all of this, but why is still Africa still staggering behind in terms of economic development? Because we are now in the 4th industrial world, but Africa is still staggering behind. What seems to be the problem?
As I said before, there are 4 categories of explanation. You ask for explanation. There are 4 categories. Some of them are cultural explanation, some of them are social explanations, some of them are natural explanations, some of them are mental explanations. But I also want to question an assumption behind your question. You assume that that's bad. But I don't think that that's bad because you focus too much on the poverty, but you also do not focus on the wealth. But by conversely, we focus too much on the wealth in America, but we don't focus too much on the poverty. Now, by poverty and wealth, I don't mean exclusively money. Just in case you think that I'm talking about money. I'm not talking about money just by itself. I use that word in a much broader context. And that is important to understand wealth and poverty too. So in many other ways, Africa is much more developed than the West. Let me give you one example, just in case you think that this is shocking. This is not shocking at all, except that the Western mass media don't talk about it, and people here has been colonized so much. They look at the mirror from the Western standpoint. Let me give you one example. Hospitality is a good example. In African countries, many of them have the hospitality that you, for example, as a black, if you go to Japan or you go to Germany, you may not get. But a Japanese and a German, when they come to here, they will get some hospitality and humanity that you may not even conceive when you are there. Why? Because of racism. Now, that is an important understanding of development too. Your mindset gets stuck in this kind of stereotype and racism. That's also a question of spirituality. It's also an important question of development too. You don't develop your spirit that well. You focus too much on talking about money and wealth, a car, a house, and all that. How about the other side? That's also important too, isn't it, for life? See that.
African countries have their own continental organizations, but they are also members of the international organizations as well, like United Nations and others. Do they really have an impact on Africa's development?
Yes, I do think that the international organizations consciously and unconsciously have done something good, but also done something bad. Because every time when the international organization come in, they always impose their values on you, ask you what to do, change this before I give you this and this and this and this. Now the problem here is that who are the people in those international organizations? Africans? Who are in control of the organization? Who make the decision? What is the ideology, the analysis, the framework that they use? Are those from African think tanks? Are those from African academics? Are those from black professors? No. All of them that make those decisions, look at the decision-making processes. They are not from you. They are from those powers. And when you, as I always said, you can learn as much as you want from others, and that's important in life. We are in the age of globalization. You cannot close-minded. You have to open up and learn. But the point is, you learn, but you have to do something for yourself and ask yourself, who are you? You have to invent things for yourself and ask, what do you want? Instead of what you want is based on what other people want. And you watch the films, the TV, the radio, and all that. You look at everything and say, I want that too. And all of a sudden, your identity is a mirror of someone else. You cannot get ahead in life, in development like that, if you are always thinking and behaving like that. Look at the Chinese is a good example. I talk about this in different interviews. The Chinese now, they have their own identity. They don't just borrow the Western identity, they have their own. They learn, they copy, but at the same time, they do something which is very, very Chinese. The way of development in China in the last 40 years is borrowed from different elements, but in the end, they are very Chinese because they know what they are. They pursue them, but not on the basis of Western discourse and Western ideology. Development like this, you're always behind. That is the problem here. I have been in so many countries now, and in Africa especially too, that every time the local people talk about development like this or some other case, it always one way or the other ask the same question, the same answer, always from the standpoint of someone else or of other cultures, not from you. Development, by the way, in that sense, is not an African concept.
Then what do African leaders have to do?
I think that it's not just a question for the African leaders. Again, see that this is another problem again. This is the mindset in Western mass media. They keep blaming the leaders. Now the local people use the same jargon.
They're on the forefront.
Yeah, see that this is not good. I have been in so many countries now, and I have seen that many of the problems are not the leaders, are the people themselves. So don't just use, see, what is in Africa is not just in Africa, it's also in the rest of the world. People need to think outside the box. They get trapped of the box so much that when they ask question, the question in one way or the other is always from the other side. You don't know how much they trap your thinking. They shape your thinking. They control your thinking. You need to get out of it. Even that question now is also in many ways Western-centric. I know quite well about this because I'm from the West. I grew up there. I was educated there. So whatever you say, I know very well how it's linked. But on the other hand, I've been in so many other countries. I can see how clearly things are not like that at all. So even your question now need to be deconstructed too. So as an African question from the African standpoint, but not from an African question from the Western standpoint again, on development, blaming the leaders.
My reason is because the world becomes, it's now a village because it's globally one thing, because culturally, culture is a bit stemming down. And most of the countries are adapting to the Western because of trying to link or trying to reach in terms of political or economic maturity.
Yes, but remember, again, you see, the same thing again. Behind your question is about globalization, but globalization does not mean Westernization. Be careful about that. You see that? Behind your question is another assumption, and the people talk like this all the time. I heard about it so many times. They talk about the age of globalization, but the age of globalization is often like following the Western values and beliefs. Whatever Western powers do, you do it. Their values stand for the values of humanity. You watch the BBC, you watch CNN, you watch all those TV, the viewers, and you copy that. You code that. But I think that it's important to learn. I don't mind that. Look at China. China has been learning from the West too. But China has also, they know quite well who they are. They have their own values and beliefs. They pursue them, but at the same time they learn from others. That's why they are not behind anymore. Now they are getting ahead. I said in my book more than 25 years ago in my PhD dissertation at MIT in 1995, and later on I followed up with that. I predicted at that time that China will rise to its former greatness because there is a power shift in the global era. And this is very important. You can learn something from it, but in the end you have to go back and ask yourself, what is the African identity?
So you've got to be yourselves.
You have to know who you are, otherwise you will always behind others. If you follow others, that means that you have to keep asking them what to do. And who are you? Right. And that's why you cannot be very happy in the end if you don't know who you are.
Professor Dr. Baofu, thank you for your time on Times of Program.
Thank you for inviting me.
Right. Mr. Mutleyo again, Professor Dr. Peter Baofu. Ke motho a tsamaileng haholo mme o ka rona ha ya Lesotho o tla ithuta hore na ha ya Lesotho le yona e sebetsa ditaba jang, ditaba tsa dipolotiki, ditaba tsa tikoloho, ditaba tsa moruo ka kakaretso. Ha re mathe re feta le lefapeng la dipapadi.